Crime like that that's so violent and so tragic.
When they initially found her, they thought that Lawrence and Jenkins had shot her.
Forget about the presumption of innocence, there must be a presumption of guilt.
Guilty on all counts, prison for the rest of their life.
Or maybe there should be more DNA testing done.
I'd like to meet a girl. You know, I mean, it's been 24 years since I've seen a girl.
And the results came back excluding our two clients.
It's hard to imagine, like you're taken out of the picture for 25 years, thrown back into it, and expected to just adjust.
The system is flawed.
Good evening, I'm Andrea Lutz. Imagine sitting in prison for a crime you did not commit, behind bars, knowing you're innocent. The days turn into months, the months turn into years, and you start to lose faith in the system. Now there is a network devoted to fighting for people in this very situation. It's called the Innocence Project. There are teams of lawyers, journalists, and volunteers working in 46 states to clear people who have been wrongly convicted. The network has exonerated more than 350 people through DNA testing alone. 350 people who get a second chance at life. People like Fred Lawrence.
I'm having a hard time readjusting to this. This ain't nothing like it was when I left.
All right, well, that is Fred Lawrence. Him and his acquaintance, Paul Jenkins, spent 23 years in prison for a brutal murder of a Helena woman back in 1994. And this spring, thanks to the work of the Montana Innocence Project, a judge cleared them on all of those charges. But not everyone was celebrating their release. The family of the victim still believes that Fred and Paul are guilty.
She was a vibrant person and everybody liked her. It kind of held her family together, I guess, kind of.
Dave Simak's sister, Donna Maher, was born and raised in East Helena. She attended Capitol High School and stayed in the area to raise her own children, teaching them about all the reasons she loved Montana.
We used to go horseback riding a lot, camping, rodeos.
Her youngest daughter, Janelle, says Donna worked to make sure she and her older sister had everything they ever wanted.
We were pretty spoiled. My mom spoiled us.
Four-wheelers, a horse, personalized birthday cakes, and countless gifts on Christmas.
There'd always be our one big gift from Santa, and there was tons of gifts from them.
All things that cost money. Donna worked 2 jobs to give her daughters everything they needed. On January 11th, 1994, she was at one of those jobs, closing up at her brother's bar, the Jackson Creek Saloon, in Montana City.
I was at the bar that night. We left at probably 9.
No one really knows what happened after 9 o'clock that night. They just know Donna didn't come home.
Yeah, I think Carl called me like at 5 or 6 in the morning, I think is the first phone call that we had. Asked where Donna was, and nobody knew, you know.
We woke up at, I think it was around 5 or 6 in the morning. She wasn't home. So my dad went out to Jackson Creek. He'd called my grandma and everyone first, see if they'd seen her. And he went out to Jackson Creek, and when he got there, the doors were open, all the machines were open, our truck was gone.
A scene etched on the mind of an 11-year-old girl. Janelle had been in the very same bar just hours before her 34-year-old mother disappeared. She still remembers the vivid details of the way things had changed when she walked in the next morning.
I remember going in there and there was like a table, because usually we put the chairs up at night, and there was one table, 2 chairs down, and they had like the Shaky Day and the quarter jars sitting there.
Hours later, a woman walking along Colorado Gulch Road found a body.
Colorado Gulch is actually like 18 miles away from Jackson Creek, actually.
Today, a white cross marks the spot.
Oh, yeah, the worst of the worst.
Donna was so badly injured, investigators initially thought she'd been shot. They later learned she was beaten with a hard object, maybe a crowbar. She was tied up and dumped on the side of the road.
It was life-changing. Never get through it.
For months, police searched for clues. They offered a reward for anyone who could lead them to the killer or killers. 9 months later, a tip. A man who thought his son-in-law, Fred Lawrence, and his son's acquaintance, Paul Jenkins, may have been involved.
At least after, 9 months of waiting for the culprits to be caught, we finally caught them.
Fred and Paul were put on trial. Dave and Janelle sat through every moment of that multi-week trial.
I missed school for every day of it.
11 years old, sitting in the same room with 2 men accused of killing her mother.
I remember it being scary, because I was young. And I was always scared they would get out and come do something to us.
On the stand, Fred Lawrence, a father of 2, from Texas initially. His family was living in Montana at the time. And Paul Jenkins, also a father of young children. Both families were living in Boulder at the time. Both struggled for money.
Our system, it calls for proof beyond a reasonable doubt to convict someone, but what does a reasonable doubt mean? You can't put a number on it. It's not 90%, it's not 95%. You can't say what percent it is.
Key evidence at the trial, a witness who thought they'd seen one of the suspects' cars late at night at the Jackson Creek Saloon, and Paul Jenkins' own wife, who suffered from dementia.
She had some really very, very questionable credibility issues.
After weeks in the courtroom, finally a verdict the Maher family had waited months to hear.
Guilty on all counts, and that's when we thought, we finally caught him.
They'd both serve a life sentence without the possibility of parole.
It was relieving having them locked up. It didn't change, the fact that my mom's not here, but it took some of that fear away.
But what the jury didn't hear was very much physical evidence. No murder weapon, no DNA, and no one witnessed the final moments of Donna's life out here on Colorado Gulch Road.
In a crime like that that's so violent and so tragic, there's a natural tendency, I think, for a lot of people to think, well, law enforcement did its job, they arrested these people, and they charged them. There must be forget about the presumption of innocence, there must be a presumption of guilt.
Closure for one family.
Well, everybody, I think, was excited, but at the same time, Donna's still gone. It's not going. It's not like any kind of verdict's going to bring her back.
Meant heartbreak for 2 other families.
I didn't have no money, but I love my kids. They're what's kept me going all these years.
Coming up, the handwritten letter that would give Fred and Paul a second chance, and the one piece of evidence that could provide clear, definitive proof of who killed Donna Maher. In the past 30 years, more than 2,000 Americans have been exonerated, cleared of charges, and released from prison for crimes they did not commit. The National Registry of Exonerations reports 19,000 years have been lost behind bars. Just 10 years ago, a group of people in Montana came together to investigate injustices under the big sky. And so far, the work of the Montana Innocence Project has cleared 6 people.
So our mission of the Innocence Project is to exonerate those that have been wrongfully convicted.
Lisa Mecklenburg Jackson is the executive director of Montana's Innocence Project. It's a small team with a big job, freeing people who are serving time for crimes they didn't commit. There are just 3 full-time staff members at Montana's Innocence Project, housed at the University of Montana's Law School. Most of the work is done by volunteers and law students.
Well, I think it's something that people are very passionate about. You know, people, I think, have a kind of a soft spot for injustice.
Prisoners reach out to them, usually with a simple handwritten letter.
They just hear about us and then they contact us and see if there's anything that we can do to help them.
And that's just what Fred Lawrence did in August of 2009.
My name's Fred Lawrence. Everybody calls me Tex.
He said, I'm not guilty, I'm innocent.
Fred Lawrence and Paul Jenkins, a man Fred described as his fall partner, were serving time at the Montana State Prison for the brutal murder of Donna Maher. The hometown girl, a mother of 2, Donna was robbed as she was closing the Jackson Creek Saloon in Montana City on January 11th, 1994. The suspects cleaned out the slot machines, moved Donna's truck, and took her 18 miles away, where she was brutally beaten and dumped on the side of the road. Police looked to Lawrence and Jenkins after a tip from Lawrence's father-in-law, a tip that netted the father-in-law $3,000 in reward money. The men were tried and found guilty.
Don't mind, put the glasses on, I hope.
For years, Fred tried to get help.
So this letter says, "To whom it may concern. I'm writing you this letter. Many of my friends and family believe you can or will help me. Frankly, I don't hold out much hope."
Staff attorney Toby Cook is reading the first letter the Montana Innocence Project got from Fred Lawrence in 2009, a letter that would be Fred's first step toward a second chance.
Both myself and my fall partner are innocent.
Boy, in the average year, we probably get, I'm sure well over 100. We probably get 100 letters.
But they only take on about 5% of the cases that come to them.
We're only interested in helping the people that are actually and factually innocent.
There's a pretty rigorous screening process that we go through.
It's years and years of investigations.
Something in this letter made the innocent look at the case.
Sent him back a detailed questionnaire. It's about 16 pages long, and we asked for details about the case. The most important part is we ask him, what evidence of innocence do you think exists that we can look to investigate further? He even had an inkling that there was some DNA test results that were either inconclusive or maybe there should be more DNA testing done.
Legal director Larry Manch and his staff attorney Toby Cook found out that there were several pieces of evidence that could be put through DNA testing.
Thankfully, there were physical items of evidence that were still preserved. Bits of rope, for example, and other items that were at the scene of the crime. And those were tested. And the results came back excluding our 2 clients.
Excluding Lawrence and Jenkins, the 2 men who spent more than 20 years in prison, their DNA not found on a single piece of physical evidence. But on a piece of rope soaked in Donna Maher's blood, they did find the DNA of another man spending time in the Montana State Prison, David Wayne Nelson.
Cross-examine the state's witnesses.
Nelson pled guilty in 2016, admitting to the brutal deaths of 79-year-old Beverly Giannotti and her 57-year-old son Greg. The story drew national attention over speculation the 2 from Deer Lodge may have been killed over a missing gold bar. Nelson was doing some handiwork for the Giannettis at the time. He told authorities when Greg confronted him about the bar, Nelson beat him to death with a hammer. Beverly walked in and he strangled her with an electrical wire. He dumped the bodies and cleaned up the house. Beaten, strangled, dumped. The Giannettis' murders eerily similar to Donna Maher's. It turns out DNA wasn't the only thing tying David Wayne Nelson to Donna's murder. It seems Nelson had been bragging about that killing to his own nephew.
The nephew, Fred Nelson, came forward, testified this spring in Helena, and in chilling detail and really graphic detail about what his uncle had told him.
That testimony, along with the DNA uncovered by the Innocence Project, was enough for a Helena judge to drop all charges against Lawrence and Jenkins. After 23 years in prison, both men walked free.
So clearly things have changed a lot.
Oh my God.
An average prison cell in America is roughly 6 feet by 9 feet, less than half the size of a college dorm room. Still, being outside of those walls seems strangely more confining for one of Montana's latest exonerees.
This ain't nothing like it was when I left.
Up next, the difficult transition back to life on the outside and the shockingly few resources available to help exonerees adjust back into society. After 23 years in prison, Fred Lawrence and Paul Jenkins were released earlier this year, set free thanks to the work of the Montana Innocence Project. After spending decades in prison for a crime they did not commit, you might think that they were thrilled to be released, and they were grateful. But Fred Lawrence sat down with us exclusively, talks honestly, openly about the struggles he's had adjusting to modern life.
I didn't hear what it was. That's because you're not listening.
After 23 years behind bars for a crime he didn't commit, Fred Lawrence is struggling with modern technology.
How much these things cost? I almost put this into the wall the other day. I was almost in that kind of concern.
Fred's originally from Shep, Texas, a small town about 40 minutes outside Abilene.
Well, I can make good barbecue.
Before going into prison, he was a family man, a husband, a father of 2 living in Boulder, Montana. In 1995, his father-in-law made $3,300 in reward money after tipping off police that Fred and an acquaintance may have killed Donna Maher. But there was no physical evidence linking them to the case. But they were tried and convicted. They always maintained their innocence. While in prison, Fred's wife and mother passed away. His daughters were placed into foster care and later adopted. Fred was told he'd have no way of contacting them. He clings to the only picture he has of his girls and the memories of those little girls growing into women while Daddy was locked away.
Family is the most important thing in the world. That's the way I was raised.
And without family on the outside, Fred's relying on the Montana Innocence Project to help him find his way.
Sometimes I wish I wasn't out here. I know that sounds crazy.
It doesn't sound crazy to Executive Director Lisa Mecklenburg-Jackson. It's something men or for clients have experienced after being released.
You know, I think it's been definitely a struggle for all of them, and it's easy to understand why. You know, here they've been in a setting where they've been essentially, taken care of. Every meal is provided, food, shelter, don't get a chance to make any decisions. Essentially everything's sort of put before them, and now all of a sudden they're out and they're making every decision.
I can go places, but I got no car, I got no transportation. I spent 24 years in prison, so I can't drive. I lost my license. I have a hard time just coming out of the house. I'm not used to freedom, having any freedom. Every now and then I'll go out on the back porch and take a dip of snuff and just sit there. I'm trying to take all this in.
It's just hard to imagine, like you're taken out of the picture for 25 years, thrown back into it, and expected to just adjust. What do you eat? How do you find money? How do you, where are you going to live? How do you take care of yourself? They haven't had to do that for 20-some years.
Paul is living with family, but Fred is all alone.
The Innocence Project, if it wasn't for them, I'd be walking the streets with nothing.
At 56, he admits it's like being an infant in a big, bold world.
I'm like a little kid now. I can't go anywhere without somebody because I'll get lost and won't be able to find my way back.
The technology is so different. I think every time he gets in a car still and it starts beeping at him to buckle his seatbelt, he freaks out. Because of course when he went in, that was not something that happened.
Uh-oh, I got something on here.
When Fred went to prison, there were no smartphones, no Google, no social networks.
This place has gotten crazy.
So we'll show you how to get to your gallery.
On this day, he's meeting with a social media expert to get a crash course on using a phone that's been bringing him so many frustrations.
You have no idea.
No, I tapped into some site, and next thing you know, I had these things telling me, oh, you punch here and we'll erase all this. And so I punched that and 20 more would pop up. And my phone got hot because it had so much crap coming into it. I trust more people in there than I do out here because people out here seems they want to scam you. And I don't.
When prisoners are released in Montana, they're eligible for what's called gate money, cash they can use to start up their lives again, buy a bus ticket, or get some food. There are special rules about who can get gate money, and many of those proven to be innocent do not qualify.
We're saying it doesn't matter. You know, you are less important than those people who have actually committed a crime.
I'm not eligible for any of that because it's like I was never in prison, even though I spent 24 years there. The system's flawed.
The staff at the Montana Innocence Project is left to help their clients adjust to life again. They're helping Fred with some of the basics like food and lodging. While he is struggling with life on the outside, he's been able to find some joys in the first experiences back in the real world.
I don't know what it's called. It's a coffee drink. It comes in a glass bottle and it's made with Starbucks.
I'm addicted to those every morning.
Frappuccino?
That's
Yes.
it. Those things are great.
Yes.
And he tells us he will never forget his first trip to Walmart.
The place is as big as an airport hangar. I mean, I've never seen anything like that. I had to walk around for an hour trying to figure out how to buy a freaking t-shirt and a pair of pants. It's overwhelming, we'll say.
But through the struggles, Fred is finding joy and hope that he'll be able to settle in and find a new purpose in this new world. A second start, a second life, a second chance. Fred and his co-defendant, Paul Jenkins, are the 5th and 6th people the Montana Innocence Project has exonerated. They're still working on several other cases. They're always hearing from new inmates claiming they are also innocent. The nonprofit is funded through private donations and is always in search of new donors and volunteers. In fact, this month, they celebrate their 10th year in Montana. If you'd like more information on the work that they do or how you can get involved, you can visit our website. I'm Andrea Lutz. Thanks for watching.